It's 6 p.m. on a Wednesday here in Korea. Welcome to Arirang News. I'm Daniel Che. Let's start with the headlines. The nuclear treaty between South Korea and the U.S. that allows Seoul greater peaceful nuclear activity goes into effect. It's a possible prelude to enriching uranium or reprocessing spent nuclear fuel. The 5-day mourning period for President Kim Youngsam comes to a close on Thursday with a state funeral that starts at the National Assembly and a procession that ends at Seoul National Cemetery. And despite the rain, citizens continue to pour into numerous altars set up to honor the late leader. France and the U.S. reaffirmed their commitment in fighting the Islamic State militant group. They plan to broaden the scope of their airstrikes to destroy ISIS together. A new nuclear treaty between South Korea and the United States should be coming into effect as we begin our newscast. The treaty allows Seoul to undertake certain research and development without having to get Washington's approval every 5 years. South Korea's Foreign Minister Yun Byung-se will exchange an MOU with the U.S. Ambassador to Seoul, Mark Lippert. The two sides struck the deal in April, allowing Seoul to expand its peaceful nuclear activity. Formally signed in June, this accord replaces a treaty signed more than 40 years ago. Although currently disallowed, the door has been left open for the possibility of Korea being allowed activities like enriching uranium or reprocessing spent nuclear fuel. It's day 4 of the 5-day national mourning period for the late President Kim Youngsam, and continued rain since last night has not held back thousands of people from paying their respects. According to our Park Ji-won, it isn't just Koreans who feel a great sense of loss.
Tens of thousands of mourners continue to visit Seoul National University Hospital, paying their respects to the now deceased former leader Kim Youngsam. In the past 4 days, over 25,000 people have visited the hospital, and nearly 100,000 have paid their respects at various altars nationwide. Former President Chun Doo-hwan was one of those. He paid his respects on Wednesday. A pro-democracy activist, Kim was put under house arrest for about 2 years during Chun's grip on power in early 1980s. France's ambassador to Korea, Fabien Penon, also visited, leaving a note saying that a heroic fighter for democracy and a friend of France has been lost. National Assembly Speaker Chung Eui-hwa plans to pay his respects once he arrives back in Korea from Germany. In China, at an altar in the Korean embassy, China's Vice Foreign Minister Liu Jiamin paid his respects on behalf of the Chinese government. Over in Japan, former Prime Ministers Tomichi Murayama and Moihiro Hosokawa today visited the Korean embassy in Tokyo, offering their condolences and remembering the late president. Meanwhile, it is unclear that because of health concerns, if President Park Geun-hye will attend a state funeral that begins Thursday at the National Assembly. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Less than a week after returning from a 10-day overseas tour, President Park Geun-hye will be launching another summit diplomacy starting Sunday. This time, the 7-day trip will take her to the UN Climate Change Conference in Paris and to the Czech Republic for a string of summits. Hwang Sung-hee reports.
When she attends the opening of the UN Climate Change Conference in Paris on November 30th, President Park will underscore South Korea's efforts to fight climate change. This includes its ambitious goal to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 37%. However, the challenge will come the next day when leaders seek a new climate change agreement. On her final day in Paris, President Park will speak at the UNESCO headquarters and meet with its secretary, Irina Vokova. Next stop, the Czech Republic. Here she'll meet the Czech president, hold meetings with the prime minister and lawmakers, and attend a business forum. The presidential office of Cheongwade said the visit is an opportunity to upgrade Korea's strategic partnership with the Czech Republic and strengthen bilateral cooperation. President Park will also attend her first meeting with the Visegrad, a regional economic community of the Czech Republic, Poland, Slovakia, and Hungary, all deemed the fastest-growing European Union nations. The trip comes just 6 days after returning from a 10-day tour that took her to Turkey, the Philippines, and Malaysia. But the presidential office says the Paris meeting is something that the president cannot miss, since leaders will be adopting a historic agreement on climate change. As for her trip to Prague, it's expected to be an opportunity to pioneer a blue ocean in diplomacy. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Moving on, the considerable speculation over the whereabouts of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's key aide Choi Ryong-hae has apparently been clarified. A source familiar with North Korea says Choi, the secretary of the North's ruling Workers' Party, has been sent for re-education at a cooperative farm in Hamgyongdo province in the northeastern part of the reclusive state. Choi is reportedly being punished for his allegedly poor work performance and for disagreeing with Kim Jong-un's youth policy. Previously, South Korea's spy agency said the top military official was being punished at a cooperative farm because of water leakage at a newly built hydroelectric power station. The commander of the United States Forces Korea has sided with South Korea when it comes to respecting sovereignty in regards to Japan's exercise of its collective self-defense. The need for a layered missile defense system in South Korea was also emphasized by the U.S. commander. Connie Kim shares with us the highlights of Wednesday's discussions.
The United States Forces Korea commander has, for the first time, expressed his views on respecting a country's sovereignty should Japan exercise its collective self-defense policy on the Korean peninsula. General Curtis Scaparrotti said Wednesday the U.S., South Korea, and Japan recognize the sovereignty of other countries and international norms they operate with, and that he expects that to be the case for the three countries. Scaparrotti was answering a question of the possibility of Japan exercising collective self-defense on the Korean peninsula. Japan's passing of its security legislation bill allowing Japan to fight in foreign territory alongside allies had raised concerns that Japan's military will enter the peninsula without the government's approval. Regards to the threat of North Korea, Scaparrotti emphasized the need for a layered, inoperable ballistic missile defense on South Korean soil. Seoul is currently developing its own missile defense system, the Korea Air Missile Defense System that can intercept North Korea's missile at low altitudes. Scaparrotti's comments are seen as the U.S.'s push to install the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD system in South Korea. THAAD is capable of intercepting North Korea's missile at high altitudes. The USFK commander assessed the U.S.-South Korea alliance as being at its strongest and said it will continue to deter North Korean threats. Around 28,500 American troops are stationed in South Korea. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
France and the United States are to intensify their respective air campaigns in Syria and Iraq targeting the Islamic State group. The move comes as the French president seeks support from world leaders to heighten their attacks on the extremist group. To help bring us up to date on these developments, here's Son Jung-in.
Less than 2 weeks after the deadly attacks in Paris, the leaders of the United States and France sat down together to reaffirm their commitment to destroy the Islamic State militant group. The two met at the White House on Tuesday. At a joint news conference following their meeting, U.S. President Barack Obama pledged to serve justice by stepping up efforts to combat terrorism alongside its European partners.
This barbaric terrorist group, ISIL, or Daesh, and its murderous ideology pose a serious threat to all of us. It cannot be tolerated, it must be destroyed, and we must do it together.
French President François Hollande said the two countries will increase their airstrikes both in Syria and Iraq and broaden the scope. However, he said France will not intervene militarily on the ground. Both leaders also agreed on the importance of closing the Turkish border to limit the movement of extremists into Europe. On Turkish downing of a Russian jet along the Syrian-Turkish border earlier that day, both leaders urged Russia and Turkey to avoid escalation. Obama called on Russia to redirect its strikes on defeating IS instead of opposition forces in Syria, which he believes only bolsters President Bashar al-Assad's regime. President Hollande said he will reaffirm that point when he meets with Russia's President Vladimir Putin on Thursday. Meanwhile, in a bid to rally support for a more coordinated international campaign against IS, Hollande plans on meeting with other world leaders this week, including Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel on Wednesday and China's President Xi Jinping on Sunday. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Staying on Syria, after Turkey downed a Russian warplane near the Syrian border, NATO, of which Turkey is a member of, has called for calm and de-escalation of what it called a serious situation. Russia's President Vladimir Putin described the incident as a stab in the back. Park Se-young has the latest.
Tensions between the former Cold War enemies escalated on Tuesday after Turkish fighter jets shot down a Russian warplane that Turkey says had violated its airspace. Russia rejected Turkey's claim, and Ankara responded by asking for an emergency NATO meeting. This is one of the most serious clashes between a NATO member country and Russia in half a century. Writing first to the UN Security Council, Turkey said it shot down the jet, which had flown more than 1.6 kilometers into its airspace for 17 seconds, despite being warned 10 times in 5 minutes to pull away. The Turkish president added that in recent weeks, Turkish airspace has been violated numerous times during Russian airstrikes on Syria, but Turkey's, quote, cool-headedness had prevented worse incidents in the past.
Nobody should doubt that we made our best efforts to avoid this latest incident, but everyone should respect the right of Turkey to defend its borders.
Rejecting Turkey's claim, Russia's President Vladimir Putin says the jet was about 1 kilometer inside the Syrian border when it was hit. He warned the incident would have serious consequences for the two countries' relations. While calling for de-escalation, NATO says the alliance stands in solidarity with Turkey. Meanwhile, the Russian military confirms that one of the 2 downed pilots had been shot dead by rebels inside Syria. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
Coming back to South Korea, the ruling Saenuri Party and the government is pushing for a law to prohibit street protesters from wearing masks or other facial coverings during rallies or demonstrations. The move follows a large rally that turned violent on November 14th. Kim Youngsam fills us in.
The ruling Saenuri Party submitted its anti-mask law on Wednesday to forbid demonstrators from covering their faces with masks. The ruling bloc wants to ban the use of facial coverings which could prevent identification, especially during illegal demonstrations. They have called for the opposition's support.
If the opposition bloc cooperates in revising this law, then we will be able to better protect people who are willing to undertake peaceful protests and guarantee more freedom of expression. We hope to pass the revised law within this regular session.
The ruling party lawmaker also pointed out that countries such as Germany, France, and the U.S. banned protesters from wearing masks during rallies. If they don't comply with the law, enforcement officers can demand they remove the mask or be fined. However, the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy has ridiculed the move.
The ruling party's proposal to revise the anti-mask law should not be used to stop protests, but rather be used to disclose authors who are hiding behind the government mask to state-authored history textbooks.
The MPAD opposes the law, saying it infringes on individual freedoms and that penalizing demonstrators for wearing masks, even when there is no clear and present danger of violence, is an abuse of power. Civic groups also said the government's move was nonsense.
It's just nonsense. It's hard to define what a mask is. Scarves, mufflers, masks, hats, and sunglasses, they can all be used to prevent identification. It's just unconstitutional.
However, the ruling bloc and the government is urging the law to be actively reviewed in light of this month's violent rally, where some protesters hid behind their masks. Kim Youngsam, Arirang News.
Moving on to a lighter story now. The grand opening of the Asia Culture Center took place in Korea's southwestern city of Gwangju on Wednesday. The venue aims to help to boost the country's status as a cultural powerhouse by promoting cultural development and exchange of Asian culture. Kim Ji-yeon was there.
An array of performances ranging from Korean folk pansori, a musical, ballet, opera, media art, and fine dancers on wires were presented at Gwangju's Asia Culture Center grand opening on Wednesday. The performance shows the goal and vision the center is promoting, which is cultural convergence, the creation of art and culture that transcends genres and boundaries. The venue is expected to promote the development and exchange of various Asian cultures. To do this, it plans to promote cooperation with other Asian nations by providing assistance and engaging in various joint projects. The center is accommodating some 20 teams of Asian artists participating in its residency program. They have access to the venue's facilities, including its state-of-the-art equipment, 4,000 square meters of studio space, a theater, and exhibition space.
5 research labs for the development of cultural technology will also be set up, enabling an ideal testbed for new cultural content. During the opening ceremony, Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-ahn hoped the center will help achieve the government's goal to improve the country's status as a cultural powerhouse.
The Asian Culture Centre will promote the government's initiative of the creative economy and cultural convergence, which will help generate a synergy effect in creating jobs and boosting the local economy.
Constructing the 160,000 square meter building took 11 years, costing more than $610 million. It was built near a preserved provincial government building, the site of the 1980 May 18th democratic uprising against the country's dictatorship. Kim Jeon, Arirang News, Gwangju.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. As always, thank you for watching. Do join us again at 10 p.m. Korea time for more.